with the clutch replaced, it was on to try and figure out a few other things. I removed the drawstring from the choke, and in the pin my dad had sourced some piano wire and some solder, and we could push a new drawstring in place, and then I was about routing it into place in the machine. Turned out I had the drawstring in the wrong location compared to the battery box, so we had to pull it back out a little and redirect it. I'm not sure if the sheeting for it has been damaged and shortened over time also, because it's quite short. Removed all the plugs to do a compression test. It's been cold, it's a little bit on the cold side, it's on the low side, it's not looking super well. It should have been a little bit higher, but it was running at least earlier. So the exhaust have been leaking a lot, partly why everything is so black here, I would guess. And I decided with things off I would tackle that also right now. And it came undone surprisingly easy. I've kept spraying all the fasteners for that, but the bolts holding the intake and the exhaust together, they all broke. And here is something smart, that it heats the intake. I think this is mainly a kerosene. When you run it on kerosene, you can see the exhaust part is actually broken in place, and it's kind of a valve redirecting the exhaust around the intake. Some paper in all the ports and trying to remove some of the gunk up here. Also, I've seen that the oil pressure gates had some life in it, but I wanted to remove it and just try it out a little with compressed air and see, because it's kind of stuck at 1 bar where it should start at 0 when there is 0 pressure, so it's not perfectly accurate, but it goes up when you give it pressure, so that's good enough for now. A new intake exhaust. Some of the pin bolts holding the exhaust in place, the double locking nuts on it, and they came undone out of the engine block or the cylinder block. Plenty of heat to the point that you get kind of a greenish flame. I'm not sure if it's brass, these nuts, maybe. They look kind of golden when cleaned up. A lot of heat and they started moving, but the real end of the pin bolt was kind of damaged, so a thread tool, one of the nuts was damaged beyond repair, so, or reusability, so that was reused. The new intake exhaust, I've seen people complain that the fit is not the greatest, and that's true in my case also. We needed to grind up some of the holes, but I missed that. Also the gaskets, they refused to go on there. I had to use the rotary tool on the small holes going on to the pin bolts to open up the holes a little bit, so the fitment there wasn't the greatest either, but hopefully it will seal up a lot better when I have it in place now. And the big plate, but then there are kind of the extra plate to reuse the same pin bolts where they had kind of clamps with that dual style intake exhaust that was on there originally. They needed to be opened up quite a bit, several of them holes, to get things to line up, so it wasn't perfect, but that was mainly annoying. I have a bigger issue here soon that I can't really understand what they have done. yeah, removing that, it's kind of a chain that ran all the way. It's a curtain in front of the radiator. When it's really cold, you can pull up a curtain to block airflow. That's not working at all. Starting to put some of the bodywork back into place. Worked on removing the broken part of the drawstring for the choke and trying to install that new solution. It was a little tricky with a bolt that was drilled a hole into, and it was a little tricky to get things to kind of get caught up as they should on there. Did a test fit on the hood, but realized we had forgotten the extension for the muffler. And here I'm not sure what the fuck they have done, because it's not an M8. The original was a standard M10, but here it's something in between, maybe something imperial in stupid measurements, or I don't know. We decided to drill out the hole and tap it in an M10 thread and get that sorted so we can lock that extension into place. And after a little bit of work, I put some paper down in there to not have any shavings go out down into the exhaust. That was pulled up, but I had the vacuum going, but didn't record that. Then the extension, then a bolt to lock it into place with a nut on there to lock things up. This is a stainless steel that will probably cause some odd corrosion issues in the future. And then it was back on to putting the bodywork into place. And if you do this, put the clamp back there before the hood, because it's really kind of, you need to bend the hood. Also remove that lid that was on top of the muffler, because it was kind of mangled and didn't seal very well. Drain the air filter, the oil inside that. It was kind of gooey, but still kind of oily also, so not extremely neglected. Here it's kind of a metal part with threads inside. You needed to lift that up and be able to get a bolt in there to get the threads to start. Kind of missed a little bit of that, but a little tricky to bolt the air filter back into place. I had put fresh oil in it. It has been later replaced with a different air filter solution for now. And then the muffler could be put into place, because I had forced that clamp in there. We filled some hydraulic oil into it. It's a level plug. I undid to see when we had the suitable amount of oil in it. I think it's between 4 and 5 liters, so the hydraulic system in these is very small. When we removed the roll bar that was on there, that was barely in place at all. Some of the bolts holding the fenders in place were removed, so I replaced those with some new bolts. The wiring back to the generator was rerouted back into place now that the hood was back on. This time around we just filled the radiator, the coolant system with water, because I will dry that a couple of times. Checked the tire pressure. The rear was kind of odd. I got a 0 reading, but they look good. The front ones were a little bit flat over the winter. And then we tried test starting it, a little bit of starter fluid, and it was a no-go. Removed one of the spark plugs to see if we had a spark and held that against a ground connection, and then for some reason it starts on just 3 cylinders, but it started. And we struggled to kill it. Just pulling the choke out didn't kill it. but turning that ignition adjuster, I think that's actually the correct way to kill it, to twist the ignition to a point where it shouldn't really spark. And my dad was kind of making fun of it, that it refused to start at first, but on 3-cylinder it was running. Sadly, well, it required a little bit of starter fluid to get it running. Even we had all 4, and you can see it dripping here. I'm addressing that later. Sadly, I can hear a lot of grinding sounds from the gearbox now, so I'm afraid it will have to be pulled apart again at some point, because I think some of the bearings inside the gearbox is really bad. But we have drained the oil that looked really milky but felt quite oily out of the gearbox. I'm gonna have it out again and do a few more tests before doing any work on it. It will probably sit all summer for the future. The fuel leak was addressed. I cut that mesh a little smaller and the seal sealed up better.